The quiet Chicago suburb of Darien was shattered in the early morning hours of March 2nd, 2010, when 25-year-old Angela Kramer called 911, whispering that someone was shooting inside her parents' home. When police responded to the large two-story house on a peaceful residential street around 3:10 a.m., it was a bloodbath. Angela's mother, Lori, her father, Jeff, and her 20-year-old brother, Michael, had all been executed, shot multiple times in the head and body. Only Angela and her older brother, Anthony, 29, who was asleep in the basement, survived the attack. The killer had broken the living room window with a hammer. As he entered, he saw Michael with his girlfriend on the couch watching TV. As Michael jumped off the couch, he shocked the killer a bit, but soon the killer shot Michael while he was trying to run to the kitchen. He followed Michael to the kitchen, who was trying to pick up knives to throw at him, but before he could make any move, the killer shot him multiple times. Luckily enough, Michael's girlfriend was able to escape out the front door. Hearing these noises, Jeff and Lori went down from their bedroom. He first shot Jeff at the bottom of the staircase nearest to him, and then shot Lori in the torso as she descended the staircase. According to the testimony, the killer panicked and started shooting continuously. For the final terrifying moments, he goes and shoots each one of them in the head. He then went to check the entire house, but missed looking in the basement, where her older brother Anthony was sleeping, or in Angela's bedroom closet, where she hid. Not being able to find anyone else in the house, the killer ran through a rear door to the next street over, where his car was parked. Once the gruesome scene was processed, shell casing showed a .40 caliber semi-automatic handgun had been used. This was no random robbery gone wrong. The house wasn't ransacked, and nothing seemed to be missing. This family was clearly targeted in a pre-planned attack. But who would want to wipe out this well-liked family in such a brutal way? Jeffrey Kramer, 50, was a well-known local businessman who owned an auto repair shop. He was described as a friendly lifetime Bears and Sox fan who always greeted people with a smile. His wife Lori, 48, was a dedicated mom, devoted to her flower garden and animals. Their eldest son, Anthony Kramer, who survived along with his sister Angela, provided a brief account of hearing the commotion from the basement just before his life was forever altered. And then there was 20-year-old Michael, full of promise, as he studied to become a mechanic like his dad. The talented drummer had an infectious laugh and loved sports. His girlfriend, weeping outside the home, barely registered the scramble to escape after the first shots rang out. Grateful to be alive, but devastated by Michael's death. As day turned into night on March 2nd, 2010, the pieces of this puzzling crime came into focus, along with the full extent of loss for Darien. Could clues from the surviving witnesses point to a suspect and motive for this unspeakable violence that struck at the core of a once peaceful community? Michael's girlfriend, who had been able to escape, in shock, described the killer to police as a male dressed in black from head to toe. And just then, Angela had an idea. She told police about her possessive ex-boyfriend, Johnny Borisov, 31, and how he hated her family, especially after their nasty custody battle over their young son. What a coincidence that Borisov just happened to call 911 himself around 8 a.m., saying he saw the shooting on the news. He offered up an alibi that he was at a nearby casino all night and had custody of their son. Police checked the casino surveillance footage, and his alibi checked out, but they were still suspicious. They got a warrant for Borisov's phone records and saw a lot of calls to and from a friend of his, Jacob Nodarse. One rambling, paranoid voicemail tipped them off that Nodarse might be involved. It was left at 5:30 a.m. from Nodarse, stating he was on the run and needed to ditch his burner phone because he was being followed by people in black SUVs. Investigators wondered, was this the panic ramblings of the triple murderer right after the crime? Digging into Nodarse's background, they learned some interesting things. He had bought a .40 caliber Glock handgun similar to the one used in the killings shortly before that night from a store 20 minutes from the Kramer home. He also had issues with depression and drugs after rebelling against his religious upbringing and moving out of his parents' house around age 18. And get this, Nodarse used to be good buddies with Michael Kramer until they had a bad falling out in November 2009 when Nodarse was kicked out of their shared apartment. With this information, the prime suspect was Nodarse, but when detectives went to bring him in for questioning, he wasn't found anywhere. The U.S. Marshals then led a manhunt and soon tracked him down in Florida, where the data showed he had some relatives. He was found on March 3rd sleeping in a van outside his parents' home near Miami. In custody, the mentally fragile Nodarse described being controlled and manipulated by the sinister Borisov. With Nodarse emotionally and financially dependent on him, Borisov convinced the young man the Kramers were going to kill his family unless he struck first. He confessed that Borisov had coerced him into the killings by exploiting his weaknesses. Apparently, Borisov had convinced the depressed and drug-addled Nodarse that he was part of some dangerous Chicago gang, and if Nodarse didn't take out Angela and her family, they would come after him. But it was all lies, into which Borisov had tapped to program Nodarse as a weapon to eliminate Angela's family. Nodarse confessed Borisov made him purchase the gun days prior, conduct surveillance on the home, and pull the trigger while everyone was asleep. Borisov encouraged the delusional young man, who practically worshipped him, as a protective father figure. But it was all lies. Borisov wasn't in any gang. He had simply manipulated Nodarse into murdering the Kramers for him as part of his ongoing custody vendetta against his ex. In chilling detail, Nodarse described how Borisov had instructed him to break in at exactly 3 a.m. while they were sleeping, eliminating Angela and anyone who came in between to make sure there were no witnesses. Still, police needed evidence to connect Borisov to the crime before their hold expired. Fortunately, police were able to legally hold Borisov for 72 hours while they hurried to corroborate Nodarse's confession. They found the ditched .40 caliber murder weapon exactly where Nodarse said he had thrown it, in a dumpster behind a restaurant after fleeing the scene. Bingo. Now able to charge Borisov with the physical evidence, incriminating recordings captured him continuing to direct the unstable Nodarse on what to admit. Borisov's attempts to silence the damaged young man he had used as a puppet confirmed his role as the cold, calculating mastermind behind the horrific murders. Once in custody, the arrogant Borisov kept running his mouth, asking Nodarse pointed questions about their plot and whether he had gotten rid of the gun in recorded jailhouse conversations. This further verified Nodarse's account. Both men were convicted in separate trials. Nodarse pleaded guilty in 2011 to 3 counts of first-degree murder. He even agreed to testify against Borisov in turn for the state taking the death penalty off the table. He was sentenced to 75 years in prison. Borisov went on trial in 2013 with Angela Kramer and Jacob Nodarse as the star witnesses. Prosecutors emphasized that Borisov was effectively holding the gun that slaughtered the innocent Kramers, but it was as if his finger is pulling the trigger every time the trigger is pulled. The jury agreed and convicted Borisov of the first-degree murders of Angela's parents and brother, as well as solicitation of murder. He was sentenced to 3 consecutive life sentences, with no chance of parole. Angela Kramer described Borisov on the stand as a perpetually angry, controlling, and abusive man who terrorized her family. She had enough of his frightening behavior and tried to cut ties, triggering his deadly retaliation. Nodarse expressed sorrow and regret for his weakness in allowing Borisov to exploit his vulnerabilities to commit an unfathomable atrocity against innocent lives. As for Borisov, behind bars for the rest of his days, the story faded from headlines but left permanent scars on a quiet community. In the end, both perpetrators were brought to justice and will likely die in prison. But the loss of 3 innocent lives, at the hands of extreme jealousy and narcissism is truly senseless and tragic. The Kramers were, by all accounts, decent, loving family members and committed parents who were adored by the small town of Darien. This wholesome family's brutal end sent shockwaves of grief and disbelief through the quiet community. The Kramers deserved so much better than dying in a horrifying hail of gunfire in their own home. But at least their surviving daughter, Angela, found the strength to move forward and raise her son surrounded by love.